Chapter 7, being an account of a great mix-up. Cutwater rummaged around in a black oak chest of stolen goods. Handkerchiefs flew out like soiled white doves, worn shoes, ladies' combs, a cowbell, a junk heap. They've had lean pickings, these raggedy pair of highwaymen, Jemmy thought, and maybe not as smart and clever as the song sellers made out. "Here's a scrap of paper, Billy," said Cutwater, finding it in the pocket of a stolen coat. "But how are we going to do the scribblement? We can't write."
"I've done it. I've seen it done. Sharpen us a hawk's feather, Cutwater."
"I'm hungry," complained the prince. "I'll have a veal pie, sir." Hold-your-nose Billy ignored him. He poked around for a beetroot and squeezed out the juice with his bare hand. It dripped like blood onto a china plate.
"There's ink for you, Prince. Take the hawk's feather and scratch out our message."
Prince Brat folded his arms. "I don't take orders from curs and villains."
"Think of your pa," said Hold-your-nose Billy. "He'll be ever so much obliged to know you're safe and hearty."
"I told you I'm hungry."
"You won't eat a bean till you do us the document."
"But I can't write," blurted out Prince Brat.
"And crows can't fly," erupted the big outlaw with a blast of garlicky bread. "You're a prince. Kings and such like are learned to write and read soon as they tumble out of the cradle. Don't think you can pull the wool over our eyes. Hop to it."
"But I can't so much as scratch my own name." Jemmy shot a calculating glance at Prince Brat. His pesky hide hardly seemed worth saving, but a scheme had leaped into his head. He might be able to trick these mangy outlaws into letting the prince go, and Jemmy would be rid of Prince Brat once and for all. "Give me the hawk's quill, I'll write the words," he announced. "That's right," Prince Brat chimed in. "My whipping boy knows his letters. Fall to, Jemmy from the streets."
"Hold on,"
said Hold-your-nose Billy, his sharp gaze flicking from one boy to the other.
"This ignorant whipping boy knows his letters, and the royal prince can't sign his own name. Something's amiss here."
"What you thinking, Billy?" asked Cutwater.
"I'm thinking these lads have mixed themselves up to flummox us."
Jemmy lifted his chin arrogantly and tried to look as prince-like as possible. "Nonsense. I'm a mere whipping boy." The big man rumbled up a laugh, showing a mouthful of yellow teeth.
"You take us for bedrock numbskulls? Certain as eggs is eggs. You're the prince. The genuine, straight up and down royal highness."
Prince Brat's face turned red as hot iron. "That ratty street orphan!" he bellowed. "That lowborn—"
"Silence!" Jemmy commanded. "Can't you see the game is up? They're on to us. Hold your tongue."
"But I'm his royal highness."
Gah,
Jemmy thought. This haughty prince didn't have the sense of a gnat. Couldn't he see a plan afoot?
"Save your breath,"
snapped Jemmy. "Stop giving yourself airs, you witless servant boy."
"Servant boy? Dare you address me? Bag your head," snapped Hold-your-nose Billy. "Give him a kick, Cutwater, if we hear another peep out of him."
"Hand me the hawk's feather," said Jemmy. "I'll write my papa, the king." Chapter 8, the ransom note. Hold-your-nose Billy tilted the princely crown on his head.
"What have you writ down so far?"
Jemmy glanced up from the sheet of paper. To the king's most sacred majesty, dear papa.
Aye, that sounds proper respectful. What else?
Our captors are loyal subjects, but scoundrels by trade. Don't cross them.
Make that a mite stronger, said the outlaw, beginning to pace. Tell him we're shameful mean, and rough as a sackful of nails. Warn him we fear no gallows.
Gallows are places where people were hung by the neck until death. Jemmy dipped the quill in beet juice and continued scribbling. I'll tell him you've got reserved seats in hell.
Aye, that's the ticket.
Cutwater had begun gnawing away at a roasted pheasant, and his cheeks swelled as if he had a monstrous toothache.
What about the king's soldiers, Billy? Now the fog's lifted, they'll be following the lad like a trail of ants. Puts my spine a shiver.
Faugh! Exclaimed Hold-Your-Nose Billy. Even rabbits get muxed up and lost in this forest. We're well hid, Cutwater. I'll warn Papa, Jemmy offered generously, that if you spy out a single uniform, you'll crack my neck like a chicken's. Prince Brat sat suddenly on a pile of moldy bedstraw. He glared icily at the whipping boy who had seized his royal title.
And don't forget the reward, Billy, said Cutwater. We want the prince's weight in gold. Bangers, right?
Tell the king that, directed Hold-Your-Nose Billy, in big letters. Now, let me reckon out a safe spot to deliver the loot, which is another word for money. Jemmy dipped the quill, but then paused. Gaw, he thought, it's not enough to choose my words as if I were a prince. Show some high and mighty Jemmy. Think like a prince.
Dimwits, he flared up. Catch penny rogues. I will not be exchanged for such a trifle. My mere weight? A paltry treasure you could carry on a shoulder. How dare you insult me?
Hold-Your-Nose Billy's red eyebrows shot up in bewildered surprise.
Insult you? A trifle? A prince is worth a prince's ransom.
The eyebrows lowered as quickly as they had risen.
No offense meant, lad. How would you calculate a proper ransom? A wagon load of gold at the very least, and jewels mixed in. As I'm alive! A wagon load?
Cutwater gulped down the wad of fowl in his mouth.
We did forget about jewels, Billy. A wagon load it is, then, exclaimed the hairy outlaw.
Prince Brat's mouth fell wide open at the whipping boy's nervy mischief. Hold-Your-Nose Billy stood over Jemmy's shoulder and watched the words being scratched out. Finally he said,
Have you made your sign yet?
About to, replied Jemmy. With as much flourish as he could manage, he wrote, Your obedient son, Prince Horace. Chapter 9. Revealing Jemmy's plan to trick the villains. Hold-Your-Nose Billy popped a clove of garlic into his mouth, ground it between his yellow teeth, and helped himself to a veal pie.
Nothing like garlic to clear the head and fend off the plague. Cutwater, give the lads a ration of breakfast.
The scrawny outlaw sliced off 2 thick pieces of coarse bread. He draped a salt herring across each slice.
Eat hearty, little fellows. This smelly stuff? Prince Brat glared at the bread and herring. It's not fit for flies. Why, we eat regulars, worms and all, said Cutwater, picking the bones of the pheasant.
I'll starve first.
Suit yourself, Cutwater snickered. This is the first time we've feasted off the king's own table, and there's hardly enough for me and Billy.
Jemmy sat on the bed straw beside the prince and contemplated his breakfast. He examined the bread closely, hunting for varmints. The prince, he knew, had never been starved enough to pick out wildlife from his grub.
Eat, he whispered. I can't find any crawly things in it. The bread's stale,
grumbled the prince. "Stale enough to patch a roof, but I've scoffed down worse." The prince began to nibble around the edges. Hold-your-nose Billy glanced over and grinned. "Take a chaw of garlic, whipping boy. It'll improve the taste considerable." Cutwater wiped his thin, greasy lips with the back of his hand. "Billy, how do we know the prince ain't laid a trap for us in that message? He could have said one thing and wrote another. Well, we'll find someone to read it off to us." Jemmy lifted his chin to a regal height. "You doubt the word and honor of your prince? Insolent oafs! Curs! I'll have you horsewhipped." Cutwater yanked Jemmy to his feet. "Who you calling them names? I'll flog your hide pink as a salmon." Hold-your-nose Billy pushed him aside. "Keep your wits. It's worse than common murder to lay hands on a prince. No need to break any more of the king's laws than we have to. If it comes to a flogging, there's his whipping boy." The prince's eyes widened, and his face blanched white. The prospect of taking a whipping himself had never occurred to him. "Sir, it wasn't me who called you names." Cutwater gave a sudden cackle. "Sir, it is now. That's more like it. But tell the prince here to keep a civil tongue in his head." Prince Brat shot Jemmy a poisonous look. The garlicky outlaw was leaning closer to Jemmy. "See here, Prince. It's not that we doubt your word and honesty. Not a bit. But all the same, let's hear you read off the message." Jemmy turned away from the man's breath and began to read. "No, no, lad. Let's have it from bottom to top. Read it backwards. I do hope for your whipping boy's sake you don't stumble and trip as if the real words ain't on paper." Jemmy shrugged. "It says, 'Son obedient your obedient son,'" said Hold-your-nose Billy. "Keep at it. 'Jewels and gold of cart full of ransom demand they.' They demand a ransom of a cart, a fool." The outlaw himself began to stumble and trip over the words. "Aye, that's the ticket." Jemmy read the message through backward, and then a second time before the hairy outlaw was satisfied. "Now then," he said, "all we got to do is get the message to the king without getting nabbed in the act." "Simple," declared Jemmy. "Send it to the castle in the hands of my whipping boy." Chapter 10, in which Prince Brat lives up to his name. Hold-your-nose Billy clapped a leery eye on the rat-catcher's son. "Prince, do you take me for a precious fool? Send your whipping boy to blab out where we're hid, eh? The king will come chopping down every tree if he finds out we're nested in the forest." Jemmy assumed a princely air of indifference. "Then tote the message yourself. There's no skin off my ear if you never get back alive." He filled his mouth with bread and herring. "I declare, this is tasty." Prince Brat scoffed under his breath. He hadn't shown a moment's interest in Jemmy's scheme to free him. Their eyes met and clashed. "God," Jemmy thought, "he's fuming like a stovepipe at being unprinced. He'll have me charged for treason." "I'll stand guard over the prince," said Cutwater. "You're the one to go, Billy." "Me?" hooted the big man. "Me, that they sing songs about and pinch their noses. The first whiff of garlic will be off with the head of Hold-your-nose Billy." "Unlikely," corrected Jemmy. "True, Papa would have you tortured a mite to loosen your tongue, but he wouldn't have your head. Not Papa. He favors slow boiling in oil." The effect on the outlaws was instant. Hold-your-nose Billy's jaw dropped. Sweat broke out across his face like raindrops. "Cutwater, you're skin and bones. You could slip in and out of a keyhole. I'll guard the prince." "Thaw, Billy! I don't fancy being boiled to a crisp. The hairy outlaw gave a loud and decisive snort. We'll send the whipping boy. Jemmy held back a sigh of relief. And my crown with him. Your golden crown, blurted out Cutwater. Not by half, we won't. Jemmy made the pretense of blazing up with impatience. Simpleton! I swear there are not two more ignorant, cloven-footed blockheads in the land. Prince Brat shot Jemmy a quick, thunder-scowl look. Stop it, he whispered harshly. Don't give them the rough side of your tongue. You'll get me whipped. Jemmy ignored him. Donkeys, he continued. Before the day is out, dozens of villains will deliver up false claims. Only my crown will convince Papa that you are the genuine villain. Hold-your-nose Billy began to pace, munching garlic cloves as if they were grapes. Finally, he tipped the crown off his head and flung it to Prince Brat. Whipping boy, deliver it to the king. If he doesn't follow our instructions to the letter, the prince'll be done for, Cutwater snickered, drawing a knife-like finger across his throat. And blab all you want, added the other outlaw. We'll pack the prince off to a different hiding place. By its smelly tail, Prince Brat tossed aside the uneaten herring. Without showing the slightest concern for Jemmy's fate, he flicked a glance at the two outlaws. I'll deliver nothing, he exploded. I won't go back to the castle. Chapter 11, containing a great deal of shouting. Jemmy was struck dumb. Did Prince Brat have sand for brains? Gah! Didn't he realize he could snatch up his crown and go free? It doesn't please me to take orders from common rascals, Prince Brat said coldly. It would please me to shake the teeth out of your confounded face, replied Hold-your-nose Billy. You may live in the castle, but you're only a whipping boy. Do as we say. I'll do what I choose, and I choose not to run your errands. Jemmy leaped up and gave the prince an angry flash of eyes. Jemmy from the streets gets these stubborn fits, he said, contrary as a mule. Let me have a word with him. I'll whip the mulishness out of him, exclaimed Cutwater, lurching forward. Prince Brat dodged out of his grasp, and a sour smile crossed his face. I'll tear up your vile message the moment I'm gone, and keep the crown for myself. Hold-your-nose Billy caught Cutwater's upraised arm. Hold off. There's something in what he says. You think he's angling for a share of the reward, Billy? Likely is. The greedy little snipe, Cutwater bleated. How much do you reckon we can spare? This calls for private words. Let's parley. Follow me. The moment the outlaws ducked out of the hut, Jemmy turned on his companion. Prince Blockhead, you should wear your crown to fend off woodpeckers. Impostor! How dare you insult me? You're enough to give the devil himself fits. Haven't I so muddled their brains they want to turn you loose, and you reward me with a royal squawk? The prince had crossed to the wicker basket and snatched up an uneaten apple tart. He gobbled it down. I'll return to the castle when I'm ready, when I choose, and not a moment before. Jemmy's eyes narrowed sharply. He couldn't fathom what was stirring in the prince's mind. Could he, for once, be concerned for someone other than himself? It's not me you think you're protecting, is it? You? Knowing they'll knock the daylights out of me as soon as they find out I tricked them? The prince shrugged. You're a quick boy. You'll think of something. I've already thought it. Once you're up and gone, I'll slip away. Out in the forest. I'll be harder to catch than a flea. But I'm not leaving, said the prince firmly. Gah! But why? Is it your pa you're afraid of? Is that why you won't go back? The prince scoffed. He won't miss me. Of course he will. Let him wait. Mind your own affairs, whipping boy. It is my affair. Do you reckon you're out on a lark? With murderers outside. The murderers shuffled back into the hut. Hold-your-nose Billy fixed Prince Brat with a hairy smile. Never let it be sung about me. About that me and Cutwater ain't generous to a fault, lad. We'll share out with you a bucket full of gold and jewels. No, replied the prince flatly, as if he'd been offered a bucketful of coal.
Don't run me out of patience, warned the huge outlaw.
The prince remained defiant. I'm staying. Hold-your-nose Billy ripped off his leather belt. I'll lash a bit of sense into your head. Jemmy saw that Prince Brat wasn't going to shift his ground. You don't need my whipping boy to get into the castle. There's a better way. Do say, exclaimed Cutwater doubtfully. My horse, remarked Jemmy. There's your messenger, sirs. Hold-your-nose Billy gave a snort.
Faugh!
That fine beast? We've been afoot since our skin-poor horse turned heels up. We need a mount in our line of work. Nitwits! Exclaimed Jemmy, as if his own princely patience were at an end. With rings on your fingers and gold in your pockets, you can take to the roads like gentlemen. You'll be traveling about in fine coaches. First, you've got to lay hands on the treasure. Cutwater made a sound through his nose like a pitch pipe. With that horse outside. One of the king's own. A horse can always find his way home, can't it? That fine beast will make for the castle stables. Note and crown. No questions asked.